Welcome to the Beat Reporter's Inbox on MLB.com, presented by Edward Jones. I'm Brittany Ghiroli, the Orioles.com reporter, with Andrew asking the questions. Andrew, what do we have first?
From Jack, is the offense ready to come to life on a consistent basis?
Well, Jack, I feel like there were some encouraging signs last night at Yankee Stadium. There's a couple things that I liked from that game. One, Trey Mancini batting leadoff, getting 3 hits out of that slot. I feel like he's a guy who can really work the opposing pitchers. That's part of the reason why manager Buck Showalter put him up there. Really set the tone for some of these other guys. We know how good Adam Jones has been, but it was encouraging to see guys like Colby Rasmus, Chris Davis, at least record hits. So yes, I'm cautiously optimistic, but obviously that's going to change depending on who's pitching every night. So certainly there are some signs. We know this lineup can be better, will be better. Will it be tonight? The Orioles certainly hope so.
Next one comes from Mary. After 7 games in, how much can you read into these games? Good or bad start for the O's?
Well, obviously, it's been a bad start for them. They win opening day. They have this terrific walk-off win by Adam Jones, and then they go on and they lose 5 in a row. And I think you're seeing what happens if they don't pitch well and that all-or-nothing lineup isn't able to hit balls out of the ballpark. So they are encouraged by the fact that Alex Cobb will be rejoining the team at some point within this next week. That should help a lot. But I think when you read into some of this, you're a little concerned. You know, they need to pitch better. They're going to be hamstrung by the fact that they have 2 Rule 5 guys in that bullpen, and they've got to find ways to have better at-bats. There's going to be nights where they can't hit 3 home runs and outslug another team. They've got to find ways to be smart, to be creative. What I do like is the fact that they're stealing bases a little bit more. They're showing a little bit more willingness to bunt, and that's going to be key for them to win close games.
Well, since you mentioned him, the next question comes from Joseph. When is Alex Cobb joining the team?
That seems to be the million-dollar question right now. But Alex Cobb is going to throw a workday either today or tomorrow. Depending on how that workday goes, he could rejoin the team before the 14th. That was the initial thought, was that the 14th, 15th would be Alex Cobb. But really, he's throwing well down there. All reports is that he looks like Alex Cobb. You know, he's a guy who didn't have spring training. He was a late signing. They don't want to force him. They don't want to hurry up the pace. Buck talked yesterday about how important he is, not just to this season, but beyond with that 4-year contract that he signed. But certainly, they need him in this rotation. They're a much better rotation with Alex Cobb. So I think they're going to lean towards bringing him up rather than him getting another sim game.
Next question comes from George. What happens to Mike Wright? He pitched well in his debut, but Cobb's return seems to make him the odd man out.
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. What happens to Mike Wright is he's going to get another start here this weekend at Yankee Stadium. And really, that's going to go a long way in deciding what they do with this rotation. Because as you mentioned, he held his own against the Astros, who won the World Series last year. He was one defensive play away from allowing just 1 run. So I don't think it's fair to take Mike Wright and just throw him in the bullpen and say, well, now you're a reliever. I think they're going to look at it, and if he has another good start, they might have to make adjustments elsewhere. They might play matchups. They might be able to carry for a little while a 6-man rotation and kind of throw certain guys in that bullpen. But certainly Mike Wright, out of options, is a guy who is in a pivotal season for him. The Orioles don't want to lose him. They don't want to expose him to waivers. So I think it's really in his hands. If he has another good start, he's going to force the Orioles' hand, and they're going to have a hard time taking him out of this rotation.
Tony wants to know, what are the Orioles going to do about Chris Davis?
That seems to be another big question there, Tony. But unfortunately, they owe him a lot of money, and they paid him a record contract. So they're going to have to find a way to get him going. Now, they did move him out of that leadoff spot, which, as I mentioned with Mancini, I thought was a good move. Mancini puts the ball in play a little bit more. Certainly he's having better at-bats right now than Davis. But Davis needs to find a way to hit the ball out of the ballpark. That's what they're paying him the big money for. So him getting that single last night, him showing a willingness to try to get those singles, once those turn into doubles, then you start to see Chris Davis. Then he starts to heat up. But other than putting him down in the order, giving him a day or 2 off like they did in Houston, there's really not much else they can do. Chris Davis is going to be a part of the Orioles organization for a long time. The only thing they can do is hope that he gets going.
The next question comes from Jessica. Any plans to lock up Adam Jones? He's been really good so far.
He has, Jessica. And honestly, if I was kind of handicapping who the Orioles bring back in terms of that free agent class, Jones would be right there at the top. A guy that means so much to this city, to this fans, who does so much in the community. And let's not forget, he's probably been their best hitter. Certainly their most consistent. He's got 3 of their first 6 home runs, all in the 6th inning or later. As I mentioned, the big opening day walk-off hero. And then last night, he puts the Orioles on the board right after Aaron Judge hits that home run. He really is the heartbeat of this team. I think if there's one guy who comes back, who they decide that they're going to commit to again, it's going to be Adam Jones.
Steve asks, could Mancini be best fit for leadoff?
Yes, I think he is. In a perfect world, the Orioles would rather him hit 3rd or even 4th. I mean, he's a guy who really, coming off of last year, surprised a ton of people, ended up finishing 3rd in that AL Rookie of the Year voting, which was stacked, obviously, with Judge at the top. But Mancini has great at-bats. He's a guy who doesn't try to do too much. They put him there in spring training a lot, and I think he felt a little pressured. But Buck said he talked to him yesterday before he put him in that leadoff spot. He said, I just want you to be Trey. And you saw last night what that means. That means a lot of really good at-bats, taking whatever he's given. And he was kind of an igniter last night for them. Adam Jones obviously had that big home run, but it was Mancini who had 3 hits. And I think when you look at that leadoff spot, that's all you can ask for is someone who's going to go out there and give the opposing pitcher a tough time in the 1st inning, because very often that sets the tone for the game.
Up next is from Robert. What's the bullpen plan?
The bullpen plan is going to be really tricky with those 2 Rule 5 guys in the bullpen. Unfortunately, they don't have the flexibility that they've had in years past, which means they can't send guys out to the minor leagues and bring up fresh arms. That places a little more emphasis on the rotation going deep into games. But honestly, in my opinion, they cannot keep both Nestor Cortez and Pedro Orojo, their Rule 5 picks, in that bullpen all year. So I think what they're doing right now is they're kind of evaluating them still at the big league level, and they're seeing, who maybe they can part with and who they have a legitimate chance at keeping. So the way this bullpen is constructed, it's certainly not ideal. Keep in mind, closer Zach Britton is hoping to be back by late May, probably early June. So that will obviously complicate matters. But I think when you look at this bullpen right now, there are some question marks, even beyond those Rule 5 guys. Michael Givens has struggled early. He's a key part of those late innings. He struggled in Houston. He struggled again last night. That's going to be something to keep an eye on, because if they can't trust Michael Givens in those late innings, then it creates an even shorter bridge to Brad Brock. So they've got to figure things out. They've got to evaluate those Rule 5 guys, and then they have to find a way to be a little bit more flexible, because you can't go this whole season with a bullpen that's simply unoptionable.
Jason wants to know, what happens if Tillman doesn't improve? What can the O's do?
Really not much. I don't see them eating that contract, that $3 million contract that can reach $10 million in escalating bonuses. Can they put him in the bullpen and demote him like they did last year? Sure. But again, you're running into that same problem where now you got another guy in the bullpen who you really can't do anything with. So I think Chris Tillman is going to get every chance to succeed. They feel like he's better than that guy from last year. That's why they signed him. So I know a lot of people are freaking out. He didn't have a good first outing. But look at Andrew Kashner. He didn't have a good debut either. He went out last night, 6 innings of 1-run baseball against a tough Yankees lineup. So they're going to give Chris Tillman, another couple starts. He's going to have a long leash, but he's going to have to figure it out at some point in time.
The next one comes from Jeff. What's Hunter Harvey's timetable?
Hunter Harvey is a really interesting name. I'm glad you brought him up. He's a guy who, keep in mind, he hasn't had a full season at an affiliate yet, so they really don't want to rush him. But you saw a lot of him in spring training for a reason. He's impressive. He's their top pitching prospect. He's a guy who I can envision being in Baltimore at some point later this season. Now, because of his innings, it's kind of similar to Dylan Bundy a few years ago. He's not going to come up and be able to probably start. More than likely, he's going to be a guy who's either September call-up or a late addition to that bullpen. And I think it'll be interesting to see how he plays at this level, because he is young, he is inexperienced, but he does have kind of that mature vibe beyond his years that Dylan Bundy had as well. He doesn't seem fazed by the moment. Of course, his father, former All-Star Brian Harvey, that's helped as well. He's kind of got that big league pedigree. He's been around it, but he's a guy who is very high on their radar. You could definitely see him at Baltimore at some point this season.
Next one up is from Kane. What's up with Gausman?
Well, it's not the second half of the season, and that seems to be when Kevin Gausman really turns it on. But You talk to people in the organization and they don't think that there's anything physically wrong with Gausman. I know his velocity was down. People were a little alarmed by the fact that it was low 90s. This is a guy who lives in the mid to upper 90s. But again, it was only one start. So they feel like you got to give these guys at least 2 or 3 before you start worrying. I know that we don't have a whole lot to go off of. They've only played baseball that actually counts for a week. But Kevin Gausman has to be a big part of their rotation, him and Dylan Bundy. There's no question that Gausman has the stuff. I think he has a tendency to get a little too fine and doesn't trust his stuff enough. But that's something that he's going to have to work on. And hopefully that fastball will tick up a little bit more as the temperature gets a little bit warmer. But, there's no indication that there's anything physically wrong with Kevin Gausman. He just needs results.
Nathan asks, chances we see Austin Hayes anytime soon?
Well, Austin Hayes has kind of been the odd man out since they signed Colby Rasmus. And if Colby Rasmus doesn't get going, I think that those Hayes echoes are going to get louder and louder. But keep in mind, Austin Hayes didn't have a great spring. He was slowed by a lat injury, didn't play that much. And, I think even if they didn't sign Colby Rasmus, the best move for Austin Hayes was to go down, get right, get healthy, get on a tear at AAA. So they're going to watch for that. They're going to see how that unfolds. And then, when he's hitting well, when he's doing well, depending on how Colby Rasmus does, then Austin Hayes is an option. It is a long season, and I know people were really excited to see him last year. He certainly played very well as one of their September call-ups, but they don't want to rush him, and they don't want to bring him up to Baltimore to sit him on the bench either. So, again, it ties into how Rasmus does. Rasmus has struggled somewhat early on, but it's too early to be kind of making those knee-jerk reactions and to have a guy like Hayes come up and then just lose Colby Rasmus for the rest of the season. They're not going to do that.
The next one comes from Felix. Safe to say the transition to short for Machado has been a good one so far?
Yeah, it's scary how good of an athlete he is. People forget. He played 3 games at Double-A Bowie at third base before he came up. And, then he won a Platinum Gold Glove at that position, but that wasn't even his position. So he got asked again yesterday about shortstop and how long that he plans to be there. He's obviously a big target of the New York media right now. But Manny Machado is a shortstop. It's where his heart is. It's where he wants to play. And he's not going to slide over. And from the Orioles' point of view, I know fans have kind of been upset. Well, it puts Tim Beckham out of position. Manny Machado is their best fielder. At shortstop, he's going to touch the ball more. He's going to be involved in more plays. That is good news for the Orioles. You want your best fielders up the middle. So I think from the Orioles' point of view as well, this makes them a stronger team. And Tim Beckham is athletic, and he's going to hold his own at third base. Is he going to be Manny Machado? No, of course not. You're not going to expect him to play at that level. But for Manny Machado, you've already seen it in a couple plays this year. He's going to make an impact. He's going to have a difference. He's a special, gifted baseball player.
Next up is from Sarah. Say the O's are competitive. Will they make a move to improve?
If they're in it, sure. I think they proved that last year when a lot of people weren't sure and they were kind of on the fringe a little bit, and they still made moves. They added Jeremy Hellickson. They traded for Tim Beckham. I think people are more kind of curious about what happens if they're not in it. Do they trade away Manny Machado and Zach Britton and Adam Jones and Brad Brock and some of these other pending free agents? And, they're kind of at a crossroads a little bit. They're really going to have to play to win, because otherwise I think a lot of these guys that are on this team right now won't be with the team in September.
From Brandon, will Miguel Castro work his way into making a few starts this season?
I think he may. A lot of it depends on how Mike Wright does, how Chris Tillman does, the overall health of this rotation. But Castro's probably got one of the top 3 or 4 arms on this rotation. The issue is he looks a lot more comfortable as a reliever. I know in spring training he didn't look great, had a little bit of a nagging injury issue, but as soon as he went to the bullpen, it was almost like he was rejuvenated, he was reinvigorated, and he just looked totally dominant. So I do think they still want to stretch him out. They still want to see what he can do as a starter. But again, he's been so good in that bullpen. Right now they don't need another starter, but he's also a pretty good option to have. So thanks for watching the Beat Reporters Inbox on MLB.com, presented by Edward Jones. I'm Brittany Ghiroli, and we'll see you again next time.